The moment my sister's perfectly manicured hand gripped that microphone, I knew something was terribly wrong. The gleam in her eyes wasn't the warm sparkle of celebration. It was the cold glint of victory. I'm Clara, and this was supposed to be my grandmother's moment. Her 90th birthday celebration at the Grand Plaza Hotel, surrounded by family, friends, and a lifetime of memories. Instead, it became the day my sister Remington showed her true colors. As the eldest granddaughter, Remington's voice rang out across the ballroom. I'm honored to announce that Grandma Ingrid has entrusted me with the full management of our family's legacy. She paused, savoring the moment, including complete control of the Wood Family Trust and all associated business interests. The champagne flute nearly slipped from my fingers. My best friend Talia, seated beside me, grabbed my arm. "Clara, breathe," she whispered. This couldn't be happening. Just last week, Grandma had talked about how proud she was of my plans for expanding the family's charitable foundation, how we'd work together to make it something extraordinary. "To family," Remington concluded, raising her glass. The room echoed with clinking crystal, but all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. I looked at Grandma Ingrid, expecting to see confusion or protest. Instead, she sat quietly, her face unreadable. Had Remington somehow manipulated her? Our grandmother had been showing signs of fatigue lately, but her mind was still sharp as ever. "Quite the surprise, isn't it?" A deep voice cut through my thoughts. I turned to find Damien, our family's longtime legal advisor, watching me with concern. "I tried to warn you last week, but—" "You knew about this?" I hissed, keeping my voice low. He nodded grimly. "The papers were signed 3 days ago. It's legally binding." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Heads turned, but I didn't care. I made my way to where Remington stood holding court with several business associates. "We need to talk," I said, forcing a smile. "Now." Remington's perfectly painted lips curved upward. "Of course, little sister. Let's step outside." The hotel's garden terrace was mercifully empty. The evening air was cool against my flushed skin. "How could you do this?" I demanded. "We were supposed to manage the foundation together. That was always the plan." "Plans change." Remington shrugged. "Face it, Clara. You're too soft for this kind of responsibility. Your ideas about sustainable initiatives and women's empowerment? Sweet but unrealistic. The foundation needs someone who understands real business." "Real business?" I laughed bitterly. "Like those 3 failed startups you launched? Or the investment scheme that almost bankrupted your husband?" Her eyes narrowed. "Watch yourself, Clara. Remember who holds the purse strings now." "You really think this is about money?" My voice cracked. This was our chance to honor everything Grandma built, to make a difference together. "Oh, we'll make a difference," Remington smirked. "Just not your kind of difference. Now, shall we return to the party? I believe they're about to serve cake." I grabbed her arm as she turned to leave. "This isn't over, Rem. You want to talk about real business? Watch me. I'll build something twice as successful as anything you could manage with stolen inheritance." She yanked her arm free. "Always the dreamer, aren't you? Good luck funding those dreams without family money." Back inside, the celebration continued as if my world hadn't just imploded. Talia appeared at my side, pressing a fresh glass of champagne into my hand. "I heard everything," she said quietly. "What are you going to do?" I watched as Remington rejoined the party, accepting congratulations and making promises about the foundation's bright future. Our grandmother sat in her place of honor, looking suddenly older than her 90 years. "I'm going to build my own legacy," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Without the family name, without the family money. And when I'm done, she'll wish she'd kept her word about working together." Talia studied my face. "This isn't just about proving yourself, is it?" "No," I admitted, downing my champagne in one gulp. "It's about showing her exactly what she threw away. I'm going to build something so successful, so meaningful, that she'll have to live with knowing she could have been part of it." As if sensing my gaze, Remington looked over and raised her glass in my direction, that smug smile still playing on her lips. I raised mine in return, forcing myself to smile. "I'll build my legacy without it," I whispered, "and it starts with you owing me double, dear sister." The party continued around us, but in my mind, the real celebration was just beginning. Remington might have won this round, but she had no idea what she'd just unleashed. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold. It's built from the ground up, brick by brick, until it towers over everything that came before. 3 weeks after the birthday disaster, I found myself sitting in Grandma Ingrid's sunroom, surrounded by her prized orchids. She'd always said these delicate flowers were like women in business. They thrived under pressure and bloomed most beautifully in challenging conditions. "Your sister called again," Grandma said, pouring tea into delicate cups. "She's concerned you're not returning her messages." "I'm sure she is." I stirred honey into my tea, watching the golden swirls dissolve. "Did she mention how she's already redirecting foundation funds into her personal pet projects?" Grandma's hands trembled slightly as she set down the teapot. "Clara, there's something you need to understand about that night." The doorbell interrupted us. Moments later, Talia burst into the sunroom, her laptop clutched to her chest, dark curls wild with excitement. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, nodding respectfully to Grandma, "but Clara, you need to see this. Remember that sustainable fashion concept we discussed? I've been running numbers all night." I glanced at Grandma, who waved her hand encouragingly. "Go on, dear. Business waits for no one." Talia opened her laptop on the tea table, scattering our carefully arranged cookies. "Look, we could create a marketplace connecting artisan women crafters with luxury buyers. Sustainable, ethical, empowering. Everything you've always talked about." "That sounds remarkably similar to what Clara proposed for the Foundation's new direction," Grandma observed quietly. "Exactly," I said, feeling a familiar fire ignite in my chest. "But better. Independent, no strings attached." Talia scrolled through her presentation. "I've identified 3 potential investor groups already. With your business background and my tech experience." "Ladies," a deep voice interrupted. We looked up to find Damien standing in the doorway, his tie loosened after what I assumed was a long day at the firm. "I hope I'm not interrupting?" "Perfect timing," Grandma said, her eyes twinkling. "Join us, Damien. These young ladies are plotting a revolution." He settled into an armchair, accepting a cup of tea. "A revolution, hmm? Does this have anything to do with the interesting proposal that crossed my desk this morning?" Talia and I exchanged glances. "What proposal?" I asked. "Remington's plans for the foundation. Very traditional. Heavy on real estate investment, light on actual social impact." He loosened his tie further. "Not exactly the vision you shared with me last month, Clara." "No," I said, my jaw tightening. "It's not." "Which is exactly why we need to move fast," Talia interjected, turning her laptop toward Damien. "Look at these projections. With the right backing—" "I might know someone," Damien said, studying the screen. "Ainsley Kent. She's made a name for herself funding women-led startups. Very selective, but—" He looked up at me. "This could interest her." "Ainsley Kent?" Talia's eyes widened. "The Ainsley Kent? Clara, she's exactly who we need." I felt a flutter of excitement, quickly followed by doubt. "She'll want to know about my background, about the foundation." "Good," Grandma said firmly. We all turned to look at her. She sat straighter, suddenly reminding me of the formidable businesswoman she'd once been. "Let her know. Let her see how you handle adversity. That's what truly matters in business." "Grandma," I started, but she held up her hand. "Listen to me, Clara. What happened with the foundation, it's complicated, but don't let it define you. Your grandmother didn't build her empire by letting setbacks stop her." "I can set up a meeting with Ainsley," Damien offered, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "No promises, but—" "Do it," I said firmly. "Talia, can you have a full proposal ready by next week?" "Already on it," she grinned, fingers flying over her keyboard. As they discussed logistics, I noticed Grandma watching me with a proud smile. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Remember what I always told you about orchids?" she whispered. I nodded, throat tight with emotion. "They grow stronger in adversity." "Just like my Clara," she said softly. "Just like my Clara." Later that evening, as Talia and I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by business plans and empty takeout containers, my phone buzzed with a text from Remington. "Heard you're meeting with investors. Don't embarrass yourself. Some things are better left to professionals." I showed the message to Talia, who snorted. "She's scared." "Good," I said, tossing the phone aside. "She should be." "Clara," Talia said seriously, "are we doing this for the right reasons? This isn't just about revenge, is it?" I looked at our plans spread across the floor: sustainable fashion, artisan crafts, women's empowerment, everything I dreamed of doing with the foundation, but bigger, better, free from family politics. No, I replied honestly. It's about building something that matters, something that helps people. The fact that it might make my dear sister squirm, that's just a bonus. Talia raised her coffee cup in a toast to making them squirm. I clinked my cup against hers, remembering Grandma's orchids. To blooming under pressure. The elevator doors opened to the 47th floor of the city's most prestigious office building, and I forced myself to take a steady breath. Beside me, Talia squeezed my arm reassuringly. "You've got this," she whispered. "We've practiced the pitch 100 times." The receptionist led us to a sleek conference room where Damien was already waiting. He stood when we entered, straightening his tie. "Ainsley's running a few minutes late," he said. "Last-minute call with Tokyo." I smoothed my blazer, the one I'd splurged on after selling my car. "How many startups does she typically fund each quarter?" "One," Damien replied. "Maybe two if something really impresses her." Before I could respond, the door swung open. Ainsley Kent strode in, her presence immediately commanding the room. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe late 30s, with sharp eyes that seemed to evaluate everything at once. "Clara Wood," she said, extending her hand. "Damien tells me you're about to disrupt the sustainable fashion industry." "That's the plan," I replied, matching her firm handshake. "Plans are easy," Ainsley said, taking her seat. "Show me why yours will work." For the next 30 minutes, Talia and I presented our vision: a digital marketplace connecting skilled artisan women worldwide with luxury buyers, ensuring fair wages and sustainable practices. As I spoke, I could feel my nervousness transforming into passionate energy. "Impressive," Ainsley said when we finished, "but there's something you're not telling me." She leaned forward. "Why did you leave your family's foundation, the one your sister now controls?" I felt Talia tense beside me. Damien's expression remained carefully neutral. "I didn't leave," I said, meeting Ainsley's gaze. "I was pushed out. My sister manipulated her way into complete control, despite our grandmother's original intentions for us to run it together. And this venture isn't just revenge. It started that way," I admitted, "but it's evolved into something more. Every artisan we've spoken to, every sustainable practice we've researched, it's shown us there's a real need for this platform." Ainsley's lips curved slightly. "Finally, some honesty. Do you know how many pitches I sit through where people pretend everything's perfect? I prefer someone who acknowledges their scars." She opened a folder, sliding out several documents. "Your financial projections are solid. Your market research is thorough. But what really interests me is your connection to these artisan communities. Tell me about the women in Guatemala." I blinked in surprise. We'd only briefly mentioned that connection in our proposal. "My grandmother," I said. "She used to source textiles from a women's cooperative there. I visited as a teenager. Their work was incredible, but they struggled to reach buyers willing to pay what their craftsmanship was worth. And now? We've already got preliminary agreements with 3 cooperatives. They're eager to—" My phone buzzed loudly. Remington's name flashed on the screen. I quickly silenced it. "Speaking of family drama," Ainsley said dryly, "how do you plan to handle potential interference from your sister?" "By succeeding," I replied firmly. "The best response to sabotage is success." Ainsley sat back, studying me for a long moment. The silence stretched until I could hear my own heartbeat. $5 million, she finally said. "Initial investment with the option for $3 million more in 6 months if you hit your targets. 20% equity." My mouth went dry. "That's more than we asked for." "I'm not investing in just your business plan," Ainsley said, standing. "I'm investing in you, Clara, in your ability to turn personal setbacks into professional triumphs." She gathered her papers. "Have your lawyers review the terms. We'll sign next week." After she left, Talia let out a squeal she'd clearly been holding in. "We did it. We actually did it." Damien stepped closer, his smile genuine. "Congratulations. I've never seen Ainsley offer more than what was asked for." My phone buzzed again. Another call from Remington. This time, I answered. "Kinda busy right now, Rem." "Is it true?" she demanded. "You're meeting with Ainsley Kent? Do you have any idea how that makes the foundation look?" "I imagine it makes the foundation look exactly like what it's become, afraid of competition." "This isn't a game, Clara. You're going to embarrass yourself." I thought of Ainsley's offer, of the confidence in her eyes. "No, Rem. I'm going to make you wish you'd kept your word about working together. But don't worry. When your artisan outreach program fails, I might consider a collaboration, for the right price, of course." I hung up before she could respond, turning to find both Talia and Damien watching me. "That felt good," I admitted. "It's about to feel even better." Talia grinned, holding up her tablet. 3 more artisan groups just confirmed their interest. We're going to need a bigger launch plan. I looked out the window at the city skyline, feeling for the first time that my dreams were within reach. Then let's get to work. 6 months flew by in a blur of contracts, late nights, and endless cups of coffee. Our platform, Artisan Legacy, was gaining traction faster than we'd anticipated. I was reviewing our latest sales figures when Talia burst into my office, her face flushed with excitement. "Have you seen this?" She thrust her phone at me. On the screen was a business news article. "Wood Foundation faces investment scrutiny amid reports of mismanagement." I heard whispers, Damien said, appearing in the doorway. He'd been spending more time at our office lately, claiming he liked the energy. "Remington's made some questionable decisions. Several board members are concerned." I handed the phone back to Talia. "It's not our problem." "No," Talia agreed, "but it might be our opportunity." 3 of their partnered artisan groups reached out this morning. They're worried about their contracts. Before I could respond, my personal phone rang. Grandma Ingrid's name flashed on the screen. "Clara, dear." Her voice sounded tired. "Could you come over? There's something we need to discuss." An hour later, I sat in her familiar sunroom. The orchids were in full bloom, their delicate petals catching the afternoon light. "Remington came to see me this morning," Grandma said, pouring tea with slightly shaky hands. "She's in trouble, Clara. The Foundation's investments, they're not what she claimed they were." "What do you mean?" "She took risks, big ones, against the board's advice." Grandma's voice cracked slightly. "She was trying to prove herself, I think, to outdo your success." I set my teacup down harder than intended. "My success? She's the one who took everything." "Did she?" Grandma's eyes met mine. "Look at what you've built without it. Your platform is helping twice as many artisans as the Foundation ever did." "That's different. I had help. Talia, Ainsley, Damien." "Yes," Grandma smiled. "You built real partnerships, real relationships. Remington, she tried to do everything alone. And now—" My phone buzzed with a text from Talia. "Emergency meeting at the office. Major potential client." "Go," Grandma said, noticing my expression. "But Clara, remember what I taught you about business. Sometimes the biggest victories come from lifting others up, not watching them fall." Back at the office, I found Talia in an intense discussion with a familiar face. Marcus, the Foundation's head of international relations. "Clara," he stood, looking uncomfortable. "I hope you don't mind me reaching out." "That depends on why you're here." "The Foundation's artisan program is falling apart," he said bluntly. "Remington's decisions have put dozens of communities at risk. They need stability, continuity." "And you want us to step in," Talia finished. "We want to propose a partnership," Marcus corrected. "Your platform, our connections. Together we could—" "No." The word came out sharper than I intended. Remington made her choice. Let her deal with the consequences. "Clara," Talia said softly, "think about the artisans." Before I could respond, Damien walked in, his expression serious. "You need to see this." He turned on the office TV, where a business news channel was running a breaking story. Wood Foundation's stocks plummeting amid revelations of unauthorized fund transfers. Sources suggest CEO Remington Wood may face board investigation. My phone rang. Remington's number. "What do you want?" I answered. "Clara." Her voice was different, broken, desperate. I messed up so badly. I'm busy, Rem." "Please," she whispered. "I don't know who else to call. The board, they're meeting tomorrow. They're going to— I can't lose everything. Not like this." I thought of Grandma's words about victory and lifting others up, about the artisans caught in the middle of our family drama. "Come to my office," I said finally. "Bring the program files, all of them." After hanging up, I found Talia, Damien, and Marcus watching me. "Are you sure about this?" Talia asked. "No," I admitted, But Grandma once told me, true legacy isn't built on others' failures. It's built on turning failures into something better. Besides, Damien added with a slight smile, imagine Remington having to admit publicly that her little sister saved the Foundation's flagship program. That's not why we're doing this, I said, but I couldn't help smiling back. My phone buzzed with a text from Grandma. Proud of you, dear. Remember, the strongest orchids share their strength. I looked around my office, at the success we'd built, the team we'd gathered, the difference we were making. Maybe this wasn't the revenge I'd originally planned. Maybe it was something better. Talia, call Ainsley. We're going to need her input on this partnership structure. Marcus, get me those files. And Damien? I paused, meeting his warm gaze. Stay? We might need legal advice. Always, he said softly. Outside my office window, the city sparkled in the evening light. Somewhere out there, my sister was swallowing her pride and preparing to ask for help. But this time, I'd be ready with more than just revenge in mind. Remington looked different sitting in my office, her usual perfect posture slumped, designer outfit slightly wrinkled. The stack of files she'd brought sat between us like a wall. I don't understand, she said, staring at the partnership proposal I'd laid out. You're willing to help? Just like that? Not just like that, I replied. There will be conditions, starting with full transparency about what really happened to the Foundation's funds. She flinched. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it. Talia's voice was sharp as she entered with coffee. Because Ainsley's lawyers will want answers before we proceed. Remington's hands trembled as she accepted the coffee. I thought I could triple our returns. There was this investment opportunity. It seemed perfect. Let me guess, Damien said from his corner of the room. Private equity? High-risk foreign markets? Both, Remington whispered. I lost everything. The artisan program funds, the emergency reserves, even some of the board members' personal investments. I leaned back, letting the magnitude of her confession sink in. And Grandma, did she know? No, she shook her head violently. I kept it from her. I thought I could fix it before it all fell apart, I finished. Tears spilled down her cheeks, smearing her mascara. I was so sure I could prove I deserved to be in charge, that I could do better than your careful, sustainable approach. She laughed bitterly. Look how that turned out. The door opened and Ainsley strode in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Well, this is quite the family reunion. Remington straightened, hastily wiping her eyes. Ms. Kent, Save it, Ainsley cut her off. I'm not here for explanations. I'm here to discuss solutions. She turned to me. Clara, are you sure about this? Merging your artisan program with the Foundation's remaining assets is risky. It's not a merger, I corrected. It's a rescue mission, with proper oversight. And new leadership, Talia added pointedly. Remington's head snapped up. What? I pulled out another document. The board agrees. If we do this, you step down. The Foundation's artisan program becomes a subsidiary of Artisan Legacy, with joint oversight from both organizations. You planned this, Remington accused, but there was no real anger in her voice, just exhaustion. No, I said softly. I plan to build something successful enough to make you regret your choices. This is something else entirely. Damien stepped forward, laying out the legal papers. The board meets in 3 hours. If we're doing this, we need signatures now. Remington stared at the documents, then at me. Why? After what I did to you, why help? Because watching you fail won't help those artisans who trusted the Foundation. Because Grandma taught us both better than that. And because I met her eyes. Because you're still my sister. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Finally, Remington picked up the pen. I don't deserve this chance, she said, signing her name. Probably not, Talia agreed cheerfully. But that's what makes Clara better than you. Ainsley gathered the signed papers. I'll present these to the board myself. Clara, you'll need to be there. We'll all go, I said, including Remington. She needs to face this properly. After they left to prepare, Damien lingered. That was impressive, he said softly, turning a revenge plot into a rescue mission. Maybe revenge was never really the point, I replied. Maybe I just needed to prove something to myself. And did you? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Grandma. I heard about the meeting, she said when I answered. Remington told me everything, about the money, about your offer. Are you disappointed in her? In her choices, yes, but not in how she's facing them now. She paused. And I'm very proud of you, Clara. This is what real leadership looks like. After hanging up, I found Damien still watching me. Ready to face the board? He asked. Actually, I smiled, I need to make one stop first. 20 minutes later, I walked into Grandma's sunroom carrying a pot of orchids. She looked up from her book, surprised. These are from that artisan greenhouse in Ecuador, I explained, setting them beside her other plants. The one you always said we should partner with. They'll be our first new joint venture under the Restructured program. Grandma touched the delicate petals. Beautiful, just like their symbolism, which is growth through adversity, beauty from chaos, and, she smiled knowingly, the power of second chances. My phone buzzed, Talia reminding me about the board meeting. It was time to face the music, to transform a story of betrayal into one of redemption. Ready? Damien asked, appearing in the doorway. I looked at Grandma's orchids, old and new growing together, and nodded. Ready to build something better than revenge. 3 months after the board meeting, I stood on a stage in Guatemala City, surrounded by artisans and their incredible work. Our first joint showcase between Artisan Legacy and the Foundation's reformed program was about to begin. The press is here, Talia whispered, adjusting my microphone, including that reporter who covered the Foundation's scandal. Good, I replied. Let them see what happens when competition becomes collaboration. The exhibition hall buzzed with energy. Buyers from major luxury brands mingled with local craftswomen. Remington stood in a corner, notably more subdued in a simple black dress, talking quietly with some of the artisans she'd previously neglected. Quite a turnout, Damien said, appearing at my side. Ainsley's connections really came through. Speaking of Ainsley, I nodded toward the entrance where our investor was leading in a group of international buyers. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, stepping up to the podium, welcome to the first annual Artisan Legacy Showcase. As I spoke about our mission and vision, I caught Grandma's eye in the front row. She sat regally in her wheelchair, beaming with pride. Next to her, Remington listened intently, her expression a mix of admiration and regret. After the speeches, I made my way through the crowd, stopping to chat with artisans I'd come to know over the past months. Maria, a master weaver from Peru, grabbed my hands excitedly. Clara, the buyers, they love our new designs. 3 orders already. Make that 4, a familiar voice said. I turned to find Remington standing there, a catalog in her hands. The Foundation would like to place a significant order for our international gift program. Maria looked between us uncertainly, clearly aware of our history. That's wonderful, I said genuinely. Maria's work deserves recognition. Remington nodded, then hesitated. Could we talk? Privately? We found a quiet corner near the textile display. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Remington finally said, about what drove me to do what I did. No, please, let me finish. She twisted her hands together. I was so focused on proving I could be better than you that I forgot what really matters. These artisans, their stories, their craft. You saw that from the beginning. We both did once, I reminded her, before the inheritance mess. The inheritance, she laughed bitterly. You know what's ironic? If I hadn't been so desperate to control everything, we could have built something amazing together from the start. Before I could respond, Talia rushed over. Clara, sorry to interrupt, but the Minister of Culture is here. She wants to discuss expanding the program nationally. Go, Remington said. This is your moment. Actually, I said, making a split-second decision, why don't you join us? You know more about the Foundation's existing relationships here than anyone. Her eyes widened. Are you sure? Consider it a test run, I said. Show me you can be the sister I used to trust. The conversation with the minister went surprisingly well, with Remington offering valuable insights about local partnerships. Afterward, Damien found me by the refreshments. That was generous of you, he said softly, including her. It was practical, I corrected. Her experience is still valuable, even if her judgment wasn't. Still, he smiled. It's a long way from wanting revenge. Maybe revenge is overrated, I mused, watching Remington earnestly explaining traditional weaving techniques to some buyers. Maybe this is better? Grandma wheeled over, her eyes twinkling. Much better. Do you know what these artisans keep telling me? That they've never felt so respected, so valued. That's all, Clara, Remington said, joining us. I wish I'd seen it sooner. You're seeing it now, Grandma patted her hand. Sometimes the best view comes after climbing out of a hole you dug yourself. The evening wound down with impressive sales figures and multiple partnership offers. As the last guests left, I found myself back on the empty stage, looking out over the exhibition space. Penny for your thoughts? Damien asked, loosening his tie. I was just thinking. When Remington took control of the foundation, I thought my dreams were shattered. But looking at all this, I gestured to the displays, the orders, the happy faces of the artisans packing up their remaining pieces. Maybe they just needed to break to become something better. Like a certain sister relationship? I watched Remington helping Maria carefully wrap an intricate shawl. Maybe. We'll see. My phone buzzed with a message from Ainsley. Numbers exceeded projections by 40%. Board meeting next week to discuss expansion. Bring your sister if she's ready. Well? Damien asked, reading over my shoulder. Is she ready? I thought about Remington's genuine efforts today, her willingness to learn, to step back, to support rather than control. One step at a time, I said. But yes, I think she might be. As if sensing our discussion, Remington looked up and caught my eye. She smiled, not her old, confident smirk, but something more genuine, more hopeful. I smiled back, realizing that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's giving someone the chance to become better than their worst mistakes. The numbers don't lie, Ainsley announced to the packed boardroom. The joint venture between Artisan Legacy and the Foundation has exceeded all projections. In just 6 months, we've tripled our artisan partnerships and quadrupled sales. I sat at the head of the table, Remington to my right, Talia to my left. The transformation from that disastrous birthday party a year ago felt surreal. Which brings us to our next phase, Ainsley continued, clicking to a new slide. International expansion. Clara, would you like to present the proposal? Before I could stand, the boardroom door burst open. Grandma Ingrid wheeled herself in, followed by a flustered assistant. I'm sorry, the assistant stammered. She insisted. Of course she did, I smiled. She's still the majority shareholder. Grandma positioned herself between Remington and me. Well, don't let me interrupt. Show us this grand vision of yours. I stood, catching Damien's encouraging nod from across the table. What we're proposing isn't just expansion, it's revolution. We've identified artisan communities in 12 new countries, each with unique crafts and stories to tell. The Foundation's existing infrastructure will support initial outreach, Remington added, pulling up her own data. We've already begun preliminary discussions in Thailand and Peru. And the technology? One board member asked. Talia jumped in. Our platform is ready for scaling. We've developed real-time translation features and cultural context indicators to bridge communication gaps. The presentation continued smoothly until another board member raised his hand. This all sounds wonderful, but let's address the elephant in the room. Given the history between the co-leaders, how can we be confident this partnership will last? The room fell silent. I felt all eyes shift between Remington and me. Actually, Remington said, standing slowly, I have something to say about that. She pulled out an envelope. This is my formal resignation as co-leader of the joint venture. Gasps filled the room. My heart stopped. Rem, what are you? Let me finish, she said firmly. I'm not leaving the project. I'm requesting a different role, head of artisan relations. In the field, working directly with the communities. She turned to face me. The truth is, Clara's the visionary here. She always was. I do better work on the ground, building relationships, than trying to prove I can lead better than my sister. Grandma reached for both our hands. Now that, she said loudly, is what I call growth. I second that, Ainsley added, and I move to approve this restructuring, along with the expansion proposal. The vote was unanimous. As the board members filed out, Damien approached with 2 champagne glasses. I'd say this calls for a celebration. he smiled, handing them to us. Wait, Remington said. There's one more thing. She pulled out her phone, showing me an email. Remember that artisan collective in Ecuador? The one that rejected us last month? The one you've been visiting every weekend? Talia chimed in. Remington blushed. They've agreed to join the program, but they had one condition. They want to work with both of us, together. Both of us? I asked skeptically. They said something about seeing real change in me during my visits, about understanding the value of second chances and sister bonds. She laughed softly. Sound familiar? Grandma wheeled closer. You know what this reminds me of? The day your mother and aunt finally reconciled after their big fight. They went on to build the Foundation's first international partnership. I didn't know that, I said. Because some stories are better lived than told, Grandma replied. Speaking of which, she pulled out an old photo from her purse. Remember this? The photograph showed Remington and me as children, dressed in our grandmother's oversized business clothes, playing at running her company. We were quite the team back then, Remington said quietly. We could be again, I found myself saying. Different roles, same goal. Partners? She extended her hand. Partners. I shook it firmly. Well, Talia announced, wiping away a suspicious moisture from her eyes. This is all very touching, but we have a launch party to plan. Damien, help me with the details? Actually, he said, not taking his eyes off me. I was hoping to discuss those details over dinner. Just the two of us. My cheeks warmed as Remington whistled softly. About time, Grandma said. I was wondering when you'd get around to that. As the others left, Remington lingered. Clara, thank you. Not just for the second chance, but for showing me a better way to lead. Thank you for being brave enough to take it, I replied. Looking around the empty boardroom, I thought about revenge and redemption, about broken trust and rebuilt bonds, about how sometimes the best victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from turning them back into family. Coming to dinner? Remington asked from the doorway. Grandma's insisting on a family celebration. I gathered my things, smiling. Wouldn't miss it. After all, we had quite a story to celebrate, not just of business success, but of sisters finding their way back to being sisters again. The autumn breeze carried the scent of orchids through Grandma's sunroom as I arranged the last centerpiece for her birthday celebration. This time, there would be no dramatic announcements or family betrayals, just healing and growth, like the flowers surrounding us. Perfect timing, Talia said, bustling in with her tablet. The live stream from Ecuador is ready. The artisans want to wish Grandma happy birthday personally. Remington appeared, carrying a familiar-looking wooden box. Look what I found in the Foundation's archives. Grandma's old business ledgers. I recognized it immediately. The ones she used to teach us accounting with chocolate coins. Speaking of teaching, Damien entered, adjusting his tie. The contracts for the new training center are finalized. 5 locations across 3 continents. I smiled, remembering how this all started, with betrayal and a thirst for revenge. Now here we were, building something far better than I'd imagined. There's my girls. Grandma's voice came from the doorway. She wheeled herself in, looking radiant in a hand-woven shawl from our Guatemalan artisans. All of you, gathering like old times. Happy birthday, Grandma. Remington and I said in unison, making everyone laugh. 91, she mused, touching the orchids, and finally seeing my garden bloom exactly as I hoped it would. Talia set up the tablet, and suddenly the screen filled with familiar faces. Maria from Peru, Lucia from Guatemala, and dozens of other artisans we'd worked with over the past year. Señora Ingrid, they called out, holding up their crafts. Feliz cumpleaños? As they sang, I noticed Remington wiping away tears. Remember when you told me success wasn't about control? She whispered. You were right. It's about connection. Always so serious, you two, Grandma interrupted, wheeling between us. Talia, dear, show them the numbers. Talia pulled up our latest report with a flourish. Artisan Legacy and the Foundation's joint ventures have created sustainable income for over 3,000 women worldwide. And that's just the beginning. The beginning? Ainsley's voice came from the doorway. She walked in carrying a thick folder. More like the middle. Wait until you see these new partnership offers. Business at a birthday party? Damien teased, slipping his arm around my waist. Business is family, Grandma corrected, and family is business. That's what I've been trying to teach these two since they were little girls playing office in my sunroom. She opened the wooden box Remington had brought, pulling out old photographs and ledgers. Look at this. Your first business plan written in crayon. You wanted to sell sunshine. Clara's idea. Remington laughed. I was the one who suggested we also sell moonlight to corner the night market. And now look at you both, Grandma said proudly. Not selling sunshine, but bringing light to communities around the world. Different roles, same heart. The tablet chimed with another incoming call. Our new partners in Thailand, eager to join the celebration. As Talia connected them, I watched my sister expertly guide the conversation, helping translate cultural nuances and building bridges of understanding. She's found her place, Damien observed quietly. We both have, I replied, just not where we expected. Grandma cleared her throat. Since everyone's here, both in person and virtually, I have an announcement. My heart skipped a beat, remembering last year's disaster. I'm stepping down as chair of the foundation's board, she continued, and I'm dividing my remaining shares equally between my granddaughters. Grandma, no, Remington started. Yes, she said firmly, because now I know you'll use them wisely, together. She pulled out 2 envelopes. Not as weapons against each other, but as tools to build something meaningful, something lasting. I looked at Remington, seeing in her eyes the same mix of emotions I felt. Gratitude, responsibility, and most importantly, trust rebuilt. Partners? She asked, extending her hand just as she had in the boardroom. Family, I corrected, pulling her into a hug instead. The room erupted in applause, both real and virtual. Talia was openly crying, Damien was beaming, and Ainsley was already making notes, probably planning our next expansion. Now, Grandma announced, I believe there's cake. And I want to hear all about this new training center. And Damien, dear, when are you going to properly propose to my granddaughter? These orchids won't stay in bloom forever. As laughter filled the sunroom, I looked around at this unlikely gathering. Family, friends, partners from around the world, all connected by something that started as a quest for revenge, but transformed into a mission of empowerment and reconciliation. You know what's funny? Remington said softly. You did get your revenge in a way. You built something so beautiful that my betrayal became the best thing that could have happened to either of us. No, I replied, squeezing her hand. We built something beautiful, and that's better than revenge any day. Grandma's orchids swayed in the breeze, their blooms a testament to growth through adversity, to beauty born from chaos, and to the power of choosing love over vengeance.